Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Philosophy of Fitness podcast, episode number 60. 60 episodes down, and we are cruising right along, guys. I'm so excited for today's episode. I can't wait for you to hear it. I sat down and had an awesome conversation with Dr. David Skolnik. So actually, I went on his podcast a few weeks ago and we had a really awesome chat. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. He is the host of the Essential Strength podcast. He's a physical therapist and he's also the owner of Stronger in Motion, which is his coaching company. So we had such an awesome conversation. If you guys are really interested in learning about injuries, specifically back pain, he is somebody who experienced a herniated disc situation a few years ago. So he talks about his journey of recovering from his herniated disc, which actually happened twice. First time around, he got a surgery. Second time around, he didn't. So he kind of dives into that whole journey. He's also a powerlifter, which is something that's really fascinating to me. This is the first person I've had on the podcast who is into powerlifting. So really awesome conversation. He sheds a lot of light on his perspective, injury prevention as a whole, why it's important to listen to your body, and also just advice for anyone out there that's maybe struggling with an injury or struggling with overtraining and kind of trying to find a balance between giving yourself the grace to rest, but also pushing yourself enough to get towards what you want. So I am so excited for you to hear our conversation. So without further ado, my friends, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Go ahead and stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back to the Philosophy of Fitness podcast. I'm very excited for our guest today. We have David Skolnik. And funny enough, I actually went on his podcast a few weeks ago. So I'll leave a link to that episode in the description, but we're doing a little podcast exchange. So David, welcome to my podcast now.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. Podcast exchanges I think they're really fun because you get a chance to get to know each other for more than 45 minutes. Now we get like a couple hours.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to kind of switch the roles up. So I'm very excited to have you on today. I think you're going to be offering a really unique perspective. I actually have never had someone on who's done powerlifting before. So that's something that I'm really interested in kind of learning a little bit more about. So I think that would just be a great place for us to start. I know you're someone that's very passionate about powerlifting, and you even shared that in the podcast that I went on. So what kind of led you to powerlifting specifically? Why did that sort of stand out to you?
Yeah, so really quick for anyone listening, just a definition of what powerlifting is, because for most people, I think powerlifting and Olympic lifting and bodybuilding all kind of get lumped into this one sort of image in your head, usually of a dude in like a Speedo with bronzer posing on a stage, and that is bodybuilding. Powerlifting is competitive weight lifting, and it is specifically a back squat, a bench press, and a deadlift with a barbell for all three lifts, versus Olympic weightlifting, which people may have seen in the last couple of months in the Olympics, and that's the clean and jerk and a snatch, which both end up with the barbell being starting on the ground and being over your head at the end of the lift. So I don't do those two. Barbell never goes over my head. I back squat, I bench press, and I deadlift. So what got me into that, the first time I trained and competed was in 2017. And I've always been an athlete of some sort, basketball, soccer, track and field growing up. But 2017, I was, how old would I have been? 27, 28. In the previous year, 2016, I'd gone through a really sort of prolonged but acute and intense period of depression and 2 suicide attempts. So we're starting off the conversation.
Oh my God.
Here.
Wow.
But that was my 2016. And that was my worst year ever, easily. And I had started early in 2017. I was already a physical therapist. I'd finished school in 2015. And I started working in a gym as a strength coach, sort of like getting myself back on my feet from a professional standpoint, doing something that I really liked and could find some confidence in. And I'd always, along with being an athlete, what I'd almost always enjoyed more than the sport was the weight room. So I just loved lifting weights. And I think powerlifting kind of started to take off on social media around 2016, 2017. So I started seeing, people like Steffi Cohen, Joe Sullivan, some of these sort of bigger names within the powerlifting world, seeing their videos and being like, those are 3 movements: a bench press, a back squat, and a deadlift that I've done. It's not necessarily a new skill, but it would be a good way to give me some structure in my training. And then also kind of coming to a realization that it had been 5 years since I'd really had a competitive outlet. So the fact that then I could train for a competition was kind of the icing on the cake. So my first competition was in Oregon. It was with USA Powerlifting. It's the Oregon State Championships, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. It just, anyone can sign up for that. And it was just amazing. Like, the training I really, really enjoyed, and going to a powerlifting meet, it sounds intimidating, but it gave me the same feeling as a track meet, which I hadn't had again since like 2012.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't had that since like 2008, because I stopped running track after my sophomore year in college. So it's been like 2008 since I'd been at a track meet. But the cool thing is, powerlifting, like track and field, for the most part, it's an individual sport, which means that, like, if you're running the 100-meter dash, the only people you're really competing with are the other people in that particular race. But everyone else, like on the team, who's a shot putter or a hurdler or whatever, is there to like cheer you on. And at the end of the day, like, if you're faster than me, you're faster than me. There's nothing I can really do about that. Like, it sucks. I would have loved to beat you, but it's not like, wrestling or a sport where there's like kind of back and forth. It's just super objective. So powerlifting was awesome because it was this incredibly supportive environment. Everyone like wanting everyone else to do their best and lift all the weights and not miss anything, not get hurt. And, if you're the strongest that day, you're the strongest. And so, yeah, that was my initial foray into powerlifting. And then just sort of strength in general, physical, and then every other element of strength. That's just kind of my North Star. Yeah. So long story short, that's how I got into powerlifting.
Wow, that's such an interesting journey, especially, I know you touched on how you were kind of depressed for a little bit. And I feel like that's something that the gym has helped so many people. Even for me, like, I used to struggle with anxiety, and the gym was a great outlet for me to kind of find a sense of purpose. So I think that's really powerful. I also think it's interesting, your analogy of comparing, powerlifting to a track meet, in the sense of the supportive nature of it. Because I remember I did track only my senior year of high school, but it did really feel that way, because it's one of those sports where you're staying in your own lane essentially, and everybody's cheering you on, which I find way more encouraging. And I think especially for someone who's wanting to find a sense of purpose with something, it seems like it's such a perfect outlet to kind of combine testing yourself and challenging yourself, but also, finding the encouragement from people around you. So I think that's really interesting, your story of what kind of led you there. So I know you mentioned when I was on your podcast and a little bit that you had a herniated disc or a couple of injuries. So I'm kind of curious when that came about, when you started powerlifting, and how that sort of impacted your journey with that whole experience.
I didn't start powerlifting until 3 years after I'd had a back surgery for a herniated disc, actually. So when I started physical therapy school, it was 2012. And at that point, I kind of had this mysterious, not really low back pain, but like glute, right hip, hamstring pain that I thought was like a high hamstring strain, something that I'd suffered in the gym. I would get a lot of pain, like sitting on a harder surface, a wooden chair, or like a stool, bar stool, something like that. And it just kind of started getting worse, kind of month over month, pretty progressively. It got more painful to stand for prolonged periods of time, or to like walk up a hill. So anything where it was all on my right side, anything where I had to sort of flex my hip with my knee being straight. So again, like kind of walking up a hill, or if you can just imagine a hamstring stretch, like my hamstring stretch was god awful. Like if I laid down on my back, and I had someone tried to lift my right leg into a hamstring stretch. It was like 45 degrees on a good day, maybe.
Wow.
And it started to not really feel like a stretch. It was just pain.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that, oh, that's kind of tight. Like we could probably stop there and, we could hang out here and it'll be a nice stretch. It was like, please put my leg down. This really hurts. And the pain started extending farther down my leg. I started getting pain in my calf, other sensation changes, like my right foot would feel cold when it wasn't, feel like my sock was bunched up, it wasn't, or wet. It was very strange. So I'm in PT school, so I'm learning about all this stuff. And I was like, wow, this doesn't seem like a musculoskeletal injury anymore. This seems like a nerve thing. So I started having professors, right, do like assessments and give me treatment plans. I was working like 10 hours a week at that time at a clinic while I was in school. So I was working with a therapist there, did like 10 sessions, and it just didn't really get better. Like it would get a little better if I was diligent with my sort of plan of care and the soft tissue work and some of the nerve mobility drills that I would get. But then I'd go for a run and it would all come back. Or I'd go play basketball. I remember the last time I played basketball during PT school, like basically my leg went sort of numb from the knee down, like all the way around my leg and my foot.
Whoa.
And so it wasn't like I could feel it, like I could touch my leg. It wasn't like it wasn't there. It was like that feeling where you've been sitting for too long, you stand up and like your leg's asleep.
Yeah. I hate that feeling.
It's very bizarre. Yeah. And so I was like, that's not good. I probably shouldn't play basketball. And some of the therapists I would work with and some of like my classmates would be like, man, we got you better. Like, why'd you go lift weights? I was like, well, what's the point of getting better if I can't do what I want to do? Like, I'm not just going to get better and sit around to stay not painful. And so it just got worse and worse to the point where, I couldn't really stand for more than 5 to 10 minutes without feeling like my right calf. I mean, the best way I can explain it is like building pressure to the point where I felt like my calf was going to explode. So I'd have to sit down.
Wow.
And then one day I was in the gym doing some kettlebell work, trying something I didn't really know how to do. It was, in hindsight, stupid. A kettlebell snatch, caught it in the wrong place, kind of arched my back. And then the next day, sitting was no longer a relieving position. So I'd always be able to sit down and my symptoms would basically go away. And then the next day, sitting down didn't solve the symptoms. It still felt like I'd get an ache in my ankle. So again, this is all coming from my back. The only relieving position was laying down. So I went and got an MRI. I had a herniated disc, low back, if anyone's anatomically inclined, like L5, S1, the last disc in your spine before you hit your sacrum. And because I'd already done like 2 years basically of physical therapy and it hadn't gotten better at that point, decided to have what's called a microdiscectomy. So they go in surgically. It's very quick. They basically snip out. So a herniated disc means that the inner portion of your disc sort of like busts through the outer ring of the disc. And then that herniated substance basically presses on a nerve root. And that's what leads to the pain and the numbness and the sensation changes and all that kind of stuff. So they basically snip out, clean out that herniated component and then solderize the disc back together. So they close it back together and solderize that outer ring. And I was like 90% symptom free the next day. It was amazing. Like woke up, I mean, obviously my back hurt because of the surgery, right? The tissue that they cut through and stuff. But I didn't have any of the symptoms down my leg, none of the burning, none of the tingling. Foot didn't feel like it was going to fall asleep. And I want to say, I mean, I had staples that came out of my back maybe a week later. And then I think 12 days after my surgery, I like packed my car and drove back to school. Driving had been horrible. Driving again was that extending my knee and being flexed and compressed. It was like basically
and
a nerve
sitting too
compression test. It was horrible. And so I could drive. I drove like 3.5 hours back to school and was like smile on my face probably the whole time because it felt fun. And then, so 3 years later, I started powerlifting and I unfortunately re-herniated the same disc in March of 2018. All the symptoms came back except worse.
Oh no.
I initially couldn't, I would like get out of bed, like limp to the bathroom, and then kind of just have to like fall back into bed because my glute would hurt so. I don't know if anyone listening has ever had nerve pain, but if you've ever hit your funny bone, you've had nerve pain, and it's just that like incredibly disturbing sensation.
It's so odd.
It's so
Yeah.
it's so odd. It's so unlike anything else. And it's like it hurts. You hit your elbow in the right spot in that funny bone, that groove, and it's like my face hurts.
Yeah.
Everything hurts. And that's how I felt anytime I would stand up my whole right leg. And it took me, I injured it on a back squat. It was a compounding months of training around what I knew was kind of worsening nerve symptoms, but I had a competition I was training for. I thought I could, sort of outsmart my injury being a physical therapist,
Yeah.
and manage it. And I had 1 week to go, and I re-herniated on my last heavy training lift of the whole prep.
Oh no.
And then it took me almost 2 years to get back to lifting that same amount of weight, but I did not have surgery.
Oh, so you healed it on your own then?
Well, with a lot of help from chiropractic care, physical therapy, a lot of rest, a lot of just staying in the positions that were comfortable as much as I could, not aggravating it. That's something with nerve pain. It's not like a strained muscle where if you sort of gently work it and stretch it, that will help. It's like if you have a nerve injury and you kind of poke at it and test it, it's going to get worse instead of getting better. It'll just perpetually stay inflamed. So yeah, like trying to be really smart, not rushing. At one point, I kind of decided I would never squat competitively again in a powerlifting meet, which I've since done. And I kind of put some limitations on myself in my mind, but now I feel really good. So yeah, it took a lot of, it was a team effort. And luckily my wife's a physical therapist, so she could be like, hey, stop being stupid.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Wow.
But yeah, long recovery.
Sounds like it. Was there a reason why you opted not to do a surgery the second time, or you just kind of wanted to see if you could heal it on your own?
It was fear, to be completely honest. I was concerned. I never even got another MRI. I'm just 99.9% sure that I re-herniated the same disc because it was the same symptoms. And it's a weak spot. Like that disc will never be as strong as it was prior to having surgery and being herniated. And I didn't want to be told, we need to do something more invasive than just a discectomy. We need to do some sort of like a laminectomy where they cut off part of the bone around your spine to decompress your disc, or a fusion or something, or be told, I could never lift again. And I was a couple years out of PT school and kind of had people around me who were very good, other physical therapists and rehab providers. And there is a lot of evidence that you can have just as good an outcome with a disc injury, even a herniation, with conservative management. You don't need to go have surgery. And yeah, so I wanted to give it basically as much time as possible. And thankfully, instead of staying the same or getting worse like it did the first time I had herniated disc, it got better. It took 6 weeks to really change. That was really sort of depressing and pretty anxiety inducing, because it was like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to lift anything heavy again. I don't know if I'll run again. I may have to have a surgery that I know will set me up for issues a couple decades down the road, almost guaranteed, and I may never be out of pain. And then luckily, things started trending in the right direction. I had some setbacks along the way. It would get better. I would do a little too much. It would get worse. But overall, again, 21 months later, I was able to squat the same weight that I did when I hurt it and not have pain.
Wow. So you're back to normal now. You're squatting. You're still, doing everything. Do you still experience pain at all, or do you think you've kind of managed it?
I do still experience some pain. I still have some nerve tension issues. Like, I'm not a very flexible person. I never have been. And if I get tight and sore and it sort of changes the way I walk or move, that'll kind of tug on that same nerve root. It's like sciatica.
Yeah.
So like last 2 weeks ago, I got back from a vacation. I had, I'm 7 weeks out from a competition, so I don't really have time to like mess around in the gym. I went right back to squatting heavy. I got really sore, and I was walking, like my hamstrings actually got sore and my adductors got sore. And so I was walking with like more rotation in my hips because I just couldn't stretch my hamstrings very well. And then that brought on a little bit of the back pain and some of the stuff that kind of runs down into my glute. But then it went away once my hamstrings felt better and I was walking normally. So I definitely still am aware of it. I'm really
Yeah.
diligent with warm-ups and core work and trying to do, mobility work as much as I can. And then I have one really strange symptom. Since it's a podcast, well, I guess you do YouTube, but I'm not going to like put my leg up on the table. It's called fasciculations. So ever since the surgery, my right calf, it looks like someone's almost playing the piano on the inside of my calf, like the keys.
No
So
way.
it's all the little like muscle fibers and muscle spindles in my calf. Like individually, it looks like fingers just kind of like moving behind my skin.
No
Doesn't
way.
hurt. And usually I can't feel it, but I can see it. Or like if
Oh
my
my
wife
gosh.
brings it up, then once I'm aware of it, it's like, oh yeah, it is. It's like my calf is always moving.
That's
Like
so
alien
weird.
calf.
I've never heard
But
of that.
otherwise, yeah, that's that's the worst. If that's the worst of it, I'm cool.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's crazy. I'm like kind of curious to see what that looks like now.
See if I can take a video. I'll send it to you
Yeah,
after.
take a video. I'll try to put it in. There's like so much that I want to unpack with what you shared, and I think something that you kind of touched on is, especially since you were saying how the second time around you really wanted to connect with the people around you and opt out of the surgery. Do you think that this experience has deepened your capacity for kind of bridging the gap between your mind and your body, for kind of understanding, just that intuitive sense of like where your body's at, where your limit is? What has your experience been with that?
I think it definitely has, and on a broader level, that's sort of where physical therapy in general, as a profession, I think is going in a lot of ways. There's a lot more continuing education being offered to physical therapists that has like a cognitive behavioral therapy component, a lot about like psychological factors, beliefs. If you believe that a treatment's going to work, it's so much more effective. I just made a post about this yesterday, and there's some negatives to it. Like as a physical therapist, whatever your beliefs about back pain are tend to influence your treatment. And that doesn't always then align with the best sort of evidence-based way of going about treating low back pain. But at the same time, a friend of mine sent me a research article just this morning as a follow-up after seeing what I shared. And it was something I want to say that if a physical therapist was really, really confident and expressed that confidence about their treatment approach to their patient, and the patient could sense how confident their therapist was that they were going to get better given the treatment plan they had, outcomes were 68 times better than
Wow.
a patient who's working with a therapist who's like, well, I'm not really sure, like this may or may not work. And so placebo is probably the most powerful medicine we have. I'll never forget. I think it was like a Netflix documentary. Again, it was kind of about the power of belief. It might have been about like happiness, but they also talked about how in like some more primitive sort of tribal cultures, if you had a shaman, right, the wise medicine man or woman of your clan, and they read the tea leaves and it said you're going to die, and you had 100% unquestioning faith in that person, those people died like within a week. And there may
Wow.
have been nothing wrong with them before. So like you can will yourself into almost anything. So yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate to have people who were confident and competent, which is the best. Confident
Yeah.
and incompetent is dangerous, but confident and competent is outstanding. That's who you want to be around. So I worked with people who fit that bill, and had learned just enough myself to give it a lot of time to see what was going to happen, and to know enough to kind of I could see the small changes, like the small victories, which is a big part of my job as a physical therapist, or, your job as a coach. Is it's really easy to think I haven't achieved my goal, so I've made no progress, versus, I haven't achieved my goal yet, but I've made these 10 steps have been taken in the right direction. There's an analogy about walking a mile. You can either, there's two ways to look at walking a mile. Like every step is a failure because you haven't achieved the mile, or every step is a success because you're one step closer to the mile. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely made me more of a believer in just the power of a mindset, and just having my own experiences with low back pain. Both of those things have made me a better clinician for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like those are both things that you wouldn't maybe expect to enhance, your practice at first, but they actually are so connected, especially with the field that you're in. And something else too that you were saying with the shamans that I think is really powerful is almost this notion of the self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he talks a lot about how our mindset affects, our physiology, and how people who are addicted to stress literally create disease in their body. So, if you're seeking out that experience, or if you go to somebody who's telling you this treatment's not going to work, like you're probably not going to have success with it, you're probably not going to, because you're putting so much energy and so much faith into that idea. Same thing with the people with the tea leaves, which is kind of what we talked about when I was on your podcast, right? Is just the power of mindset and your perspective and where you see yourself. So I'm kind of curious to pick your brain a little bit now about some more of like the esoteric things in terms of like mindset and your perspective on things. So obviously the injury was something that, you could view as a setback, or even a failure. When people get injured, sometimes they think, less of themselves, or they think they can't achieve as much because, they have this huge setback towards a goal that they're working towards. So do you have any practices in place now aside from, powerlifting that you kind of do to keep your mindset sharp, to keep yourself motivated and accountable, even if you're, missing a day or you feel soreness coming back?
Yes and no. I am someone who, I go in like fits and spurts with things like affirmations, or sort of like end of the day talking about kind of like writing down daily gratitudes, all these things that feel great. And then I'm like, I don't have 30 seconds. I'm ready to go to bed. And I get out of the habit for a year. And then I do it again for a month. And so, I think one thing for me, it's strange. Part of what made 2016 and like the 9 months where I was very, very depressed and suicidal so hard to deal with was that before then and since then, I'm a very optimistic person. So it's this like complete, just bizarre shift in my whole mindset and outlook on everything, which I think made it harder for like friends and family to help too, because it's like they had no practice and trying to cheer me up. I'm just a cheerful person. But as far as mindset stuff, I'm a fan of Stoicism. I haven't read, a ton of like the seminal works or anything, but I'm a big fan of like Ryan Holiday, and I get like the daily Stoic newsletter in my email inbox every day. And I'll usually like once a week or every 2 weeks, I'll go back and read a bunch of them in a row. I love a good quote, and there's just endless quotes in Stoicism. And so, I try and stay relatively neutral in terms of my mindset, neutral to positive for the most part. Sometimes the problem with that is that I can be I can take on too much and not be super realistic about my capacity. But I'd rather be that way than the opposite. And probably my favorite quote, and the one that I come back to a lot with patients and in my own head, is not like an ancient Stoic quote, but a Viktor Frankl quote. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, and I can never remember the exact sort of branch of psychology that he's sort of the pioneer in, but his most famous quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. So that falls in line with a lot of Stoicism, right? It's not things that bother us, it's our feelings about things.
Yeah.
And so I try and keep that in mind in general. So if I have a bad training day or I don't sleep well, or anything like that, I try not to let it sort of spin me out. And it's like, it's just a thing. It's an objective day. I could probably find some evidence for why it happened. And then I'm just going to move forward.
Yeah. I think that's such a good perspective to have. And it's something that I try to kind of embody too is, things happen around us that are outside of our control. I mean, you could probably eventually trace a lot of things that happen to you to maybe something you've done, but there are certain life circumstances that happen that you don't have any control over. So what do you always have control over is how you respond and your perspective and your choice in the actions that you make. And I think that's so powerful. And I kind of want to switch gears a little bit into more of like your powerlifting training related to your injury, because this was something I was thinking about as you were talking about this, is just how you even said earlier that you find yourself in a position of, sort of overestimating how much you have to offer, or like, overextending yourself, which I also do too. I find that I like get in this hustle mentality where I'm like, I almost feel this sense of guilt if I'm not doing something, or if I'm taking a rest day, even I find it a lot harder to take rest days. So I think kind of with your whole training experience, I think it also just highlights how your innate ability to connect with your body is so important when it comes to learning your limits, like not forcing yourself to work through an injury and kind of like overcoming that sense of guilt. Because I feel like a lot of us have been in that position before. If you're a trainer, if you're in the fitness space where you're like, oh, it's fine. You just kind of pretend the problem's not there until eventually you're going to be, forced to deal with it and you have no choice to face it. So I think it's kind of awesome that you sort of like shared that and you learned from that experience too. I mean, because then afterwards you found a way to sort of heal it on your own.
Once you've been injured, like, it's not just like a little ache or a pain, like it's an injury that takes you out for a while, then you don't want to have that happen again. And so being patient and sort of taking the long game approach to training, I think, is incredibly important. And you could compare it to pro sports, right? Like, you could be the best player in the league. You could be the best player in the NBA. But if you miss the season because you're hurt, you're not the best player, right? You were the best player. Maybe you will be when you come back, but you're not helping your team when you're sitting on the bench and doing ACL rehab. Right? You're averaging 0 points and 0 rebounds and zeros across the board until you're in the game. And I think a lot of people could probably take a little bit away from that just from their personal training, right? The most important element in training, in health and fitness, diet, I don't care what it is, strength, consistency.
Yeah.
10 years from now, are you still doing it? You're not going to get as strong in 6 weeks as you will in 10 years. And it doesn't matter how strong you get in 2 years if you're then injured for 6 months. You'll lose all of it and more. It'll come back, most likely, but you're going to lose it. And then you're going to lose chances to do all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, it's been, for me, it's like, for example, last weekend, so I'm 6.5 weeks out from a powerlifting meet from Worlds, like drug tested world championships.
Wow.
And last week I went paddleboarding with my wife and some friends. And unfortunately, we got hit by a windstorm that like pushed us across this lake and like shipwrecked us for 40 minutes. And then we had to like paddle super hard to get back. And then the next day I went to the gym and like I had deadlifts and it was terrible. I was super weak.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right. And it was like, I know, I was frustrated in the moment, but it goes back to that, like, I have the power to control my response to that. It's like, well, it's pretty obvious why I feel really freaking tired, because I was on the lake for 5 hours yesterday in the sun, and then I just got like battered by waves.
Yeah.
My back is exhausted. But I'm not going to spend time like worrying about that. And I'm also, right, I'm not a pro athlete. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm not getting paid to lift. I'm not going to skip a chance to spend 5 hours on a ridiculously beautiful lake with my wife and friends. So yeah, listening to your body, understanding that, missing one day of training won't break you. It won't even impact your goals. but pushing into pain for one day and then suffering an actual injury, that can derail quite a bit of progress. And like, for what?
Yeah.
For one extra set of curls, for 5 extra pounds for your ego, whatever, taking a week off isn't going to change anything even. And it'll probably do you good if you're at that point of overtraining. And so, yeah, listening to your body and tracking things is the other thing that I think is really helpful. I write down all my workouts, and occasionally I'll put in notes about why I skipped something or why something didn't feel good. It's like, didn't deadlift today. It was scheduled, but I had a really bad night's sleep. It's going to do more harm than good. Skip it. I'll get it tomorrow. All that kind of stuff helps. Perspective, and a coach who can help you understand that stuff. Who can tell you, hey, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you had birthday cake on your birthday. It doesn't matter that, your kids were sick last night and you skipped spin class this morning.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. That was the best decision. I affirm your action. That stuff's really important.
And that's such a huge perspective switch for a lot of people who, I think a lot of the kind of overtraining hustle mentality is ego driven. And I even recognize it in myself. It's like, why am I doing this? Like, just take a break, just stop. Like, you don't need to be doing this 7 days a week, whatever. But even for people like us who work with clients, it's like, understand that this is your life. It's not just you in the gym. It's not just you in the kitchen. Like, it's your whole life. And like you said, allowing yourself to go paddleboarding with your wife and your friends, like not beating yourself up for enjoying things that come your way, or, even taking a rest day. And I think that that's something that a lot of people need to give themselves the grace to understand. And especially if someone's had an injury, is to just be patient with yourself, because it sucks when you're out for a long time. I've never had a surgery on anything, but I've pulled my hamstring before. I've done, I've tweaked a few things here and there. And it honestly resulted from that place of ego, thinking I could just push through it and pretending I was fine, until I was like, okay, I'm out for 3 weeks. Like, I can't, run, I can't row, I can't do this or whatever. And then you're forced to kind of face with it. So, being patient with yourself, and also giving yourself the space to, like you said, understand where your body is coming from. And even what you said with where you think physical therapy is headed with like behavioral therapy coming into the equation as well. I think that's really awesome to see, is just even in medicine in general, seeing people kind of bridging the gap between the mind and the body, and really just gaining that sense of internal awareness, I think is so powerful.
It's even true in surgery, which is just sort of mind blowing. The people who, surgery is a surgery. It's about as objective as you can get. You have a knee replacement, right? That's the same, especially with the same surgeon. It's the same components. It's the same anatomy. It's the same procedure. There are outliers. There are issues that come up, but it's for the most part, it's about as objective as you get in life. It's like an orthopedic surgery. And the people who go into those surgeries thinking, this is going to be great, I'm going to get back to doing everything I want to do, it's going to be easy, I'm going to go through my physical therapy, I'm going to rehab, I'm going to get back to golf, they do really well. The same person on the same day with the same surgeon in the same operating room with the same tools, same components, same weight, same gender, they go in thinking, God, this is probably a mistake. I probably shouldn't do this surgery. Like, this is going to suck. Like, I'll probably always have pain. Their outcomes, it's going to be worse. That's what the evidence says. Same surgery. And so, yeah, it's super, super important. And the one other thing I'll say, like for you, for me, for anyone who trains, is sort of like, remember why you're doing it. I'm not powerlifting to make money or become a pro athlete. I'm doing it because I really enjoy it. I enjoy having a goal. I enjoy this specific style of training, but I also enjoy going for a run. And so in Arizona, when the weather cools down, which it will in the next like 6 weeks or so, I'm not going to be training as frequently for powerlifting. I'm going to start running again. And I don't want to get hurt by, letting my ego kind of take the wheel and then having 6 months where I'm recovering and I don't get to go explore and hike and run and do all these things. And I think a lot of people, like I am probably a little more, I think a lot of people get lost in using the gym for the gym's sake. And unless you're someone who is like me, where like my competitive outlet is literally fitness, like it's lifting things competitively.
Yeah.
That's not what most people are going to the gym to do. They're going to the gym so that they can go for a hike, so that they can play with their kids, so that they can be part of like a walking group, so they can lose a little bit of weight. And so checking in and understanding that overtraining and training to injury is only going to inhibit your ability to do what you want to do, the vehicle that the gym is actually driving you towards. I think that's also just super, super important. And it can help people identify how to best train, how to best tailor their nutrition to have goals. And those could be, you could have a different goal in the spring than you do in the fall. You could have a different goal this year than you do next year. And your training could look different. Your nutrition could look different. But kind of always checking in with yourself, like, why am I doing this? What's the outcome I want? And are the steps I'm taking leading me there? Or am I just driving 80 miles an hour in the wrong direction?
Yeah.
That's super important.
Yeah, thinking about your why, like what is the thing that you're working towards? And like you said, it's different for everyone. For some people it is, running a half marathon, which I know you also, ran a half marathon. I'm kind of curious to hear about that. But it's like
do not recommend.
Really? Oh, here I was thinking you were going to be like, it was awesome. It was great.
Well, you know what? Training was actually awesome for it.
Yeah.
So I said I was a track athlete early on, but I was a long jumper and a triple jumper. Like my sport was, you take 16 steps as fast as you can, you jump into some sand, and then you wait 10 minutes, and you do it again. So like endurance, not my forte, not something I really enjoy. And so this year, well, when the pandemic started, I started running because gyms were closed in California when I was living in Northern California. And it's one of those things, I knew this would happen, but it's like once you do it for 4 to 6 weeks, that like lung burning, just suffering aspect of running, you get better at it. And it's like all of a sudden it becomes enjoyable because you're not just trying to finish the run and not walk. You're like, oh, I could actually go a little faster today. Like I can look around and appreciate the scenery and not just be like and looking at my feet the whole time.
Yeah.
Like hoping they'll keep lifting off the ground. But training for a half marathon, it was a huge challenge. My wife and I both did it. She's run one before. She was a track athlete as well. She's a 400-meter hurdler. So she's a little more endurance oriented than I am. Still not half marathon distances by any means. I say do not recommend, just because the actual effort of running a half marathon that day was not enjoyable at all. It unfortunately happened to be on like the hottest day of the year so far, which at the time was like April. It was like 85. But like we ended up running in the middle of the day because I didn't want to run in the dark, didn't know how long it was going to take me. And it just kind of sucked. There was a bigger hill on the route than I thought there was. Like I ran farther down this trail than I ever had. It was like, oh, there's a hill that I didn't know was there.
Nice.
Right in the middle, like at mile 7.
Yeah.
Like, this is terrible. But it was a good challenge. It got me to run. It got, I will usually, my history is like I'll run for a little while and then I'll just stop and I'll start lifting again because I love it so much more. But knowing that I was going to run a half marathon again with my wife, we talked to a couple other people about maybe doing like a virtual half or something like that.
Yeah.
That helped. But I honestly don't think I'll ever run sorry, my email just popped up.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't think I'll ever run a half marathon again.
Yeah. It's funny.
I'll do a 5K.
Yeah. 5Ks are fun.
I'll do a 10K.
10Ks are fun too. It's funny you say that because I feel like so many people during that start of, the pandemic said, oh, I'm going to train for a half marathon. And I was one of those people who I found a plan online and I was like, okay, I'm going to get out there. The gyms were closed. It was great. I also got to that same point that you did of like, wow, like I would run on the boardwalk at the beach. I'm like, this is really nice. Like this feels good. And then all of a sudden I took it too far and I wasn't taking proper rest days and I did something to my hip and then I couldn't run for like 4 weeks. So it was that same kind of thing of like, you got to listen to your body. If your body's giving you warning signs or those like little, intuitive feelings of like, this doesn't feel right when I'm going up the stairs, but this feels a little bit more than like muscle soreness. Listen to that, because like you said, would you rather be resting and taking that time so that you can hop back into it a few days later, or would you rather push through it and then have yourself out of the game for like 6 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole like no pain, no gain, or like pain is weakness leaving the body, all those things. I think that's we can leave those in the past.
Yeah, I agree. Or
those can be buried.
Yeah. Or people that say, rest is for the weak. I know people in my life that refuse to take,
you'll
okay.
be dead before I will.
Yeah, literally. I know people that swear by, no rest days or work fucking harder, all these kinds of silly mantras. And I really don't agree with it. I've spoken about how anti, super hustle mentality I am. And like I said, I think so much of it is ego driven, and it's really easy to be in that trap. But I know some people listening probably also find it harder to take a rest day. If for some of us that are really used to just going all the time, it is harder to slow down and listen to your body. And hopefully you can try to get ahead of it so that, you're in a position where you're forced to, right? Where you have no option but to address it. Like if you're feeling those, little warning signs, like I said, listen to it, feel it out. And hopefully you can prevent a situation like what you had with, something where it could get more severe, the longer you're kind of stressing it.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious now if you have any sort of, last minute advice you'd give to anybody who's maybe dealing with an injury now, what they could be doing, not just physically, but sort of mentally to prepare themselves for, when they're hopefully going to be recovering.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it depends on the type of injury, and this is not, medical advice per se, but so Kelly Starrett, most people know he's probably one of the more famous physical therapists in the world. He wrote the book, The Supple Leopard. He created Mobility WOD. His company is now called The Ready State. And he talks about the 3 I's in terms of human movement and what leads to injury. And it's incomplete movement mechanics. Basically, you've got areas that are weak or muscle imbalances. You've got joint limitations, issues in stability, all these little things that like you don't necessarily even realize, but they lead to compensations. That's the first I, incomplete mechanics. The second one is insults. So those little, like you said, like a hamstring strain. It's like, well, there's probably, if you work with a good rehab professional or human movement expert, they could probably identify what maybe set you up for that strain, unless it was just straight up, kicking a soccer ball as hard as you could for the first time in 10 years. That's pretty obvious. But why was it the right instead of the left? Why does the right one always feel a little tighter than the left one? You could probably identify that. And then the third I is the actual injury, the thing that, puts you on the sidelines for weeks or months. And so I think, for anyone who's generally feeling pretty good, and this is something I kind of hope that physical therapy and chiropractic and some of these other professions go this direction, sort of like the dental approach, like a 6-month checkup, a movement checkup, and maybe they identify, the equivalent of a cavity, and you've got to come back for a couple of weeks and get some work done. Or they're like, everything looks good. Here's a couple exercises to do. That's your flossing. And you come back and see me in 6 months. But I think if you're a really active person, or maybe you're transitioning into something new, maybe you've never been much of a runner, but you want to run a 5K, next spring, or you're inspired by this conversation. It's like, well, I want to go see what, squatting kind of heavy feels like. Go work with someone who can assess how you move, give you some technique pointers, and don't wait to get injured. Get ahead of it. If you are injured, again, professional advice, right? If it's the first person you see, probably shouldn't be a surgeon, unless you've got some serious, red flag issues like numbness, legit can't pick my toes up, lost control of bowel and bladder after a fall, back issue, stuff like that. But for the most part, back pain is the most common issue that people have, and most injuries, will resolve in 6 to 8 weeks from a soft tissue standpoint. But again, I'll advocate for going and seeing a physical therapist, in part just to learn about what's going on and maybe give you some peace of mind, help alleviate the fear that comes from not knowing.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same way, I feel about finances. I don't know enough, which, leads to some worry because I just don't understand what's happening. And so go learn from someone, learn about your body, learn about the fact that you're more resilient than you might think, that this won't last as long as, the worrying part of your brain will tell you that this could be forever. And then hopefully what you can do is, usually with some guidance from a rehab professional or a coach, is identify the factors that may have led to you being injured. Was it overtraining? Was it repetitive use? I think a lot of people, if we stick with the running example, a lot of people who sort of jog or run recreationally, they've got like 2 routes and they run the same pace every time. They run left, leave their house, take a left. It's a big square around a bunch of blocks. So they only ever turn left. It's like, then they wonder why their left knee hurts. It's like, well, literally go out your door, turn the other way. I had a friend's dad, like he was having pain walking and he only did the same route. I literally told him, next time, go right, do the same route, but backwards. 2 weeks later, he's like, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. It can be that simple. Most of the time it's something repetitive. And so, try and get yourself, if you are injured, once you start feeling better, try and understand the modifiable risk factors so that same injury doesn't become something that's recurrent.
Yeah, I think that's some very sound advice, and people fear what they don't understand, right? So it's like, if you're not seeing someone, if you're not reaching out, you could be making a million worst case scenarios in your head of what's wrong with you. And, oh my God, I'm going to be dealing with this forever. So it's like, give yourself the peace of mind of at least identifying what it is and going to see someone, and then sort of working with them. And on top of that, working on your mindset, working on seeing yourself, visualizing yourself healed, visualizing yourself getting back to what you're doing. Like you said earlier, the power of your mindset with the healing process is just absolutely transformational. So it's like, if you couple those things, if you're someone, that's listening, that's injured, or even maybe you tweak something and you're kind of, listening to this, take this as your sign to take a rest day. If something's not feeling right now, take your rest day and you'll be fine. Like, you're not going to lose all of your gains because you took a few days away from the gym, which I know some of us, it's a hard pill to swallow, but we got to be reminded. Yeah,
that's just simply not how it works.
Yeah.
And one other thing about the, affirmations and visualization, that stuff is really powerful, but you have to believe it. And it's really hard to tell yourself, I'm going to get better. This pain will go away. If then the little, subconscious part of your brain immediately is like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it won't. Nope. You can't just be like, you can't have an affirmation that says like, I don't hurt. And then you're like, but I do.
No, that's so true.
Yeah, you have to, and that's where that guidance comes in. It's like, tell yourself that in 6 weeks, I will not have this pain, because you won't.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that takes the little, just the professional boost in confidence.
Yeah, somebody else to kind of hold you accountable. It's so true, though, because you could have a list of the best affirmations. You could have the best practices in place, the best journaling prompts, whatever. But if you're sitting there going through the motions like, okay, and you don't believe it deep down, you're just running through the motions, nothing's going to happen. Affirmations are powerful because of the energy and the intention that you place behind them. So I think, like you said, setting an example or even just a goal for yourself of like, in 6 weeks, I am going to have this, and just allow yourself to have full faith in it, and allow the people around you to support you too. Reach out to your people around you, and let that, energy and let that, perspective of somebody who really knows what they're talking about. Like you said, competent and confident. I love that quote. Let that be something else that kind of fuels, the power of your affirmations.
Absolutely. I think the one that people, the best example you read about is like, if you just say, I am wealthy, right? There's like the whole like money magnet. I don't know where it comes from. Like, probably from a pyramid scheme, but it's like, I am wealthy, but it's like, if you're sitting in your living room on your, couch that's falling apart with the TV that's broken, and like, you can barely pay your rent, and every morning you wake up and you write down like, I am wealthy, you're basically just arguing with yourself every day.
Yeah.
And all the evidence supports the opposite. But if you switch that to like, I am capable of becoming wealthy, it's like, there can't really argue with that. Like of course you're capable of it. So, I am capable of getting stronger than I am. I am capable of running faster than I do. I am capable of running a half marathon. So be honest.
Yeah.
You can set lofty goals, but it's got to be in a framework, in a language that doesn't immediately make you say like, God, I'm such an idiot.
Yeah.
Like,
if it turns off
no,
your subconscious mind, like it's not going to work,
Yeah.
And
you can't lie to yourself.
No, exactly. You really can't. And I think something else too, like real quick to go off of that, is obviously take rest days, and be patient with yourself. But I think the other thing with affirmations is you have to take action on it. You can't just sit on that couch in the living room and say, I'm wealthy, and be like, okay, here we go. Where's the money? Like,
wait
you
for
gotta,
the universe to rain it down. Yeah. No.
Yeah, you gotta take the action.
Same thing with training. Same thing with training.
And sometimes, honestly,
I have a healthy body weight, and then but you haven't cooked, and all you do is like DoorDash fast food. Like, man, good for your mindset, but
you got to find a way to kind of like bridge the gap and connect them. And maybe for you, maybe the action is taking a rest day, like as silly as that sounds. Maybe that's the thing that's actually going to get you closer to where you want to be. So.
Yep. I would agree. The gains come from the recovery, right? The training is the breakdown. The training breaks you down. The rest builds you up.
Yep. Rest is so, so important. It's taken me a while to realize that. And I still struggle to take rest days now, but it's something that I'm certainly working on, is, being patient with myself. And I think this whole conversation, really just highlights the importance of that, the importance of connecting with your body, being patient, trusting your process, trusting in yourself enough that you will heal if you're injured, that you will eventually get to where you're trying to go if you just sort of have faith, and also accountability. Like, reach out to people if you're looking to, powerlift, or if you're looking, to work with somebody, reach out to a coach, somebody who can guide you along that process. We are both coaches, so you guys can reach out to us if you want some guidance with, fitness, nutrition, whatever it might be. But don't be afraid to find people that you can use as a resource, because accountability is something, even in itself, just the act of having someone hold you accountable, for a lot of people is really transformative. So I want to thank you so much, David, for coming on today. This was really awesome. I learned so much about like back pain and how it manifests, which was really cool to hear. So thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you a chance to kind of plug yourself. So any links, like where people can find you, where they can listen to your podcast, what it's about.
Absolutely. Yes. I am definitely the most active on Instagram. So if you want to connect with me via social media, my Instagram handle is at Dr. David Skolnik, DPT, and I host the Essential Strength podcast. So that's every Wednesday, and it's interview style, and there are always conversations that sort of are built around the backbone of strength. So mental strength, physical strength. I just had someone on to talk about, he's a marriage counselor and sex therapist. So our conversation was about how to build a strong romantic relationship that will last. We're going to be having guests on to talk about like building a stronger like personal finance base. I mentioned that I don't know a lot about money. So I want to expand on, I think strength is the foundation. It's very key to success in a lot of realms. And so, being as strong as you can in a diverse array of skills, that's what we're going for with the podcast. So again, it's the Essential Strength podcast. We have an Instagram account specifically for the show where we do video clips, and it's a great place to kind of stay connected and see what's coming next on the show, who we have coming up for guests, to actually communicate with me, because I know podcasting, as I know you are aware, is a very one-way channel. I never know necessarily what people think of the conversations. So connecting via social media is a cool way to actually have conversations. And those are the two best places. I own a training and nutrition company called Stronger in Motion. So you can check out strongerinmotion.com. That's the best place to sort of reach out to me, along with Instagram. If you're interested in coaching, I do coach powerlifting. as well as general fitness. So got a new offer coming soon for like year-round sort of group programming at a pretty reasonable rate.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of stuff going on. But start with Instagram. Start with Instagram and listen to the Essential Strength podcast.
Cool. I love your array of guests, by the way, because I was looking through your episodes and I saw you had the dating coach on. I was like, ooh, I can't wait to listen to this. I think it's so cool how you're weaving strength into so many different areas. I love seeing, connecting sort of this, fitness space, the physical, fitness space with mindfulness and mindset to all different branches. And that's something that I'm trying to do too. So guys, check out his podcast. It's amazing. Follow him on Instagram. I'm going to leave all the links below if you want to work with him too. I'll leave links where you can find out absolutely everything that you need to. But David, thank you again. This was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Haley. It's my pleasure.